Please help me welcome Sean Lane, founder and CEO of CorssChx. Sit down. We can sit down, yes.
Cool.
Working out for me is a
I'm
struggle.
glad you didn't do stools.
Standing up. I didn't do stools on purpose because you said you didn't want
I
stools.
like stools.
See,
Yeah.
this is the kind of service that we
I
provide.
appreciate that.
We got together and had lunch 3 months ago, I want to say. And one of the things that I remember the most is you guys were making a pretty key hire at the time, and the candidate asked you what your biggest threats were.
Yeah.
And your response to him was something to the effect of, well, it's probably you if we hire you and you're a screw up.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, my point in all of that is when you look at like early stage company or you're starting a company, I mean, you have 10 employees and you hire one, that's 10% of your company. So a lot of people look at threats and they think, well, our biggest threats are external, like other competition or our ability to execute on technology. But really the biggest threat is, that 10% of the workforce that you're hiring every single time you make a hire when you're between 1 and 10. Even when you're 100, making one single hire, if that hire is not the right person and the right fit, then you can potentially impact the business in a really negative way. In fact, way more negative than anybody externally can impact your business. So the biggest threat to our company are the people that we hire, but they're also the biggest ability for us to succeed and to stand out in front of everyone. So yeah, and I think so that particular hire, I'm trying to think of exactly
Is that
which
person
one.
in the room tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think we actually hired that person.
Oh, okay.
To be honest. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to everyone understanding that if they're not the right fit, it's just not good for either one of us. So.
Yep.
And I think in that case, we made the decision that they weren't the right fit.
We'll take questions throughout too, so we'll sort of keep it interactive. Bethany?
Okay.
You want to talk louder? Beautiful. We'll take questions throughout. We'll sort of keep this interactive. So if you have a question, do what Bethany did. Raise your hand, right? Make some commotion. We'll figure out that you want to ask a question, and then we'll let you ask it. If we like it, we'll answer it. If he doesn't like it, then we'll just move on, and we'll move on to a different question. Yes.
Why did you not hire the gentleman?
So I think it was a gentleman in that case. But so from that particular perspective, I think it wasn't a culture fit. It's something that we look for very specifically. And from a culture perspective, what we look for most of all is their willingness to sacrifice to become part of CorssChx. To sacrifice time, money, relationships, whatever it takes in order to execute our mission. And if that person is not willing to sacrifice, then they're not going to make it in CorssChx. So that's, if you had to describe our culture in one word, it's sacrifice. And if they're not willing to do that, so if they bring up like, what are your hours? And if their whole life is centered around cash, comfort, and cars, which is kind of the 3 C's that we tend to find a lot in the Midwest, we don't entertain that person as a candidate.
So a lot of people are probably here because you raised a little bit of money, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago or something like that,
Yeah.
probably, right?
Right.
And so people probably want to know, how did that go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know when we met a couple months ago, you said that you actually went to Silicon Valley, hung out there for a little while, right? And you were sort of dedicated to that process of raising the money.
Right.
Talk about that process a little bit and why you went there and stayed there for a while, and some of the conversations that you had with the investment firms.
Sure. So we've raised just over $20 million so far. The first $5 million was from Drive Capital, which is a Columbus firm. We were their first investment, which was advantageous to us. I mean, Brad and I, my co-founder, he's over there somewhere. There he is back there. We were actually living in Baltimore and DC at the time, and we met this interesting venture capitalist named Mark Kwame. And I'll tell you the longer story later if we have time for it, but essentially Mark said, hey, we're building this fund in Columbus, Ohio. He had heard about our idea for CrossChx and said, we want you to move to Columbus, Ohio, and we're going to build a multi-billion-dollar company. And we hadn't even really started CrossChx. I mean, a little bit started CrossChx, but not. We didn't go into it thinking, let's build them, let's take over healthcare. But he really allowed us to see that vision. So we were very fortunate to have them as initial investors. So Chris and Mark, the founders of Drive Capital, both came from Sequoia, so they have a background in raising large funds for deploying that capital in order to grow massive businesses that change entire industries. So not just kind of your small startups. So we raised the initial $5 million. We burned through that pretty quickly. And then when we went out to raise more money, I mean, just like with anything we do, we wanted to do it right. Like we wanted to go out there and make an impact. Luckily, there's 2 founders in CrossChx, so I'm able to go to San Francisco and hang out for a month. Not a lot of people have that luxury. But the thing we have to realize, like in the Midwest, when we're growing these companies, and in Columbus specifically, is that we just don't have the trading partners here. So what I mean by that is like Drive Capital has a great big fund, right? And there's some other micro funds that exist, but if you're building a massive company and you're raising tens of millions of dollars, you're going to have to go to either coast to raise capital. It's just part of it.
Because it would be unrealistic for Drive, right, of their 250 million, right, to give 10 or 15 million to one company, right?
No, I mean I think they should give us 249 of 250, but that's
clearly you were the first and the best.
Right, sure, absolutely. So, but the point is, from that perspective, it's they call it like smoking your own exhaust or eating your own dog food or drinking your own Kool-Aid, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, like, they need validation, especially as a first-time fund. I mean, they got these LPs, limited partners that come in, giving them money. They want to prove that their thesis that you can build multi-billion-dollar companies in the Midwest is real. So to do that, they need validation from outside investors, outside established venture capitalists, to come in and price the round. You know what I mean? To come in and lend validation to some of their investments. So it was critical for us to do that. Even if Drive wanted to give us the full follow-on round, it's just not in their best interest because they need to kind of show that there's validation for the market. And the reason, we went to Silicon Valley. The goal was, we want one of the top 5 firms. That's who we want money from. We wanted smart money. We wanted money from a fund that had billions of dollars under management, so that when we do raise more and more and more, we have people that can kind of follow into the next rounds. So we just made a concentrated effort and said, we're going to rent a condominium in San Francisco. I'm going to stay there for a month. And the experience was interesting. So I'd never actually raised money before other than from Drive. And that was a little bit non-traditional because it was more conversations that evolved into a funding scenario. Whereas in this case, it's very much the pitches that you kind of think of when you think of raising venture capital. So it was my first time on stage doing pitches, which was really interesting. It was cool though. It wasn't hard from that perspective. The hardest thing is, when you raise money, you gotta get the contact with the fund or with the firm. So that's going to be stage 1. That's super tough. And if you're just a company with no connections into these bigger firms, then you're probably not going to get a meeting with a partner. And if you can't get a meeting with a partner, then it's very unlikely that you're going to make it through those stages. So the first contact is very, very important. And we were very fortunate to have Drive, being from the Valley and from Sequoia, they were able to make that initial contact with these firms. So we could go in and pitch at the partner level.
So if you hadn't already gotten an investment from Drive, how much more difficult would it have been to get in touch and to begin those initial conversations with the firms, the firms out in the Bay?
It would have been extremely difficult. So in my previous life, before CrossChx, I was a angel investor, I guess you would say. So I invested in a lot of startup companies. And when those startup companies moved on to take Series A, I was kind of a seed stage fund. We would have to create connections with series, with bigger firms, with bigger pockets. And it was very difficult. And it was difficult for me, even as an investor, to make those connections, especially ones of like really tier 1 firms. It's easier to get to some of the smaller $50 million, $100 million funds, but when you get to the $1 billion funds, it's very, very difficult. I had several companies that probably pitched 100 times and with tier 2, tier 3 funds, and still had a lot of trouble getting the connection. So it was massively helpful to have that, to be able to walk in at the partner level and pitch these partners of Andreessen and Greylock and Sequoia and you name it. That was pretty cool. But then, so the interesting thing, how it works is you go and you do your initial pitch with the partners, And you'll know it's an hour, they lock it down, it's not going to be more than an hour. You'll know basically by the end of that if it's a no. If it's a no, you'll know right away. If it's a maybe, then they won't really say it's a maybe. They'll just say we'll get back to you, and then it's like the waiting game, which is probably the hardest part of the whole process. It's kind of like when you go on a date and you're like, do I call? It's like, is she gonna call me? Am I gonna call her? You know, it's like that kind of thing. So I'm like pacing back and forth in the condo in San Francisco, like ordering Grubhub,
Snapchatting,
figuring out like what do I do? Like, should I call? Like, and I'm like, I know this is like the fourth message, but and you know, there was probably times when I scared some away by doing it too much, and there were some times when I got it just right. And you only really need to be right once, right? You need to get a really nice term sheet from one tier 1 firm, and once you have that, you're good to go. But yeah, it was an interesting, crazy psychological kind of up and down sine wave being in San Francisco for that.
So did it take the entire month that you were there?
To sign a good term sheet, it took a month. And I think, you know, I see too many, you know, companies that have the potential to be something massive, and they screw around with their funding in a way that's like, you know, I'm going to do a little bit here, a little bit there. And I think to do it right, you just have to go all in and just laser focus on it. That needs to be your task. You get that done, and you move back into, you know, operating and executing. So yeah, it took a better part of a month, and we got a term sheet we liked. We signed it and moved on. But yeah, it took pretty much the whole month.
And when we talked a couple of months ago, there was at least one firm that indicated they would give you a term sheet and they would invest if you relocated to the Valley, right?
Yeah. So that was a very common thread throughout a lot of the conversations with the partners is, okay, when you move into San Francisco or when you move into the Bay Area. And obviously you can't build a company like this in Columbus, Ohio. Not like, how are you going to get the talent? Yeah. It's like, obviously, you know, we have the talent. So there's a bit of a, you know, what we're doing here is very antithetical, right? So it's against every kind of idea that you can build massive multi-billion-dollar companies in the Midwest because we don't have the talent and things like that, which is, we know here in this room, is not true. But you know, when you're there in the Valley, that you think that is true. You think that you have some kind of exclusive on smart people, and the reality is, I mean, even a lot of the people that are there now as very successful entrepreneurs didn't start there. You know, they came from the cornfields and the farmlands of Midwest, and that's, so we just have to double down on that and say, look, we have the smart people in Columbus. We're going to do it from Columbus. And it's not because necessarily it's like raw Columbus. It's just we're proving that the people that are from the Midwest are just as good as anybody else, and that's why we're doing it here. I mean, it's a large reason, and being able to.
Somebody from the chambers here.
All right, and I love like proving it. I love proving it in execution and metrics and showing growth just like this.
Well, your Twitter handle is pretty
Unleash C-Bus.
Right. Yeah. So is your Twitter handle a sort of recognition or an homage? Not homage.
Yeah, I mean
homage.
the Unleash thing has a little bit of history for me because when I was in Baltimore, the phrase for my company was, my company's name was BTS, the company that I had back in Baltimore, and our URL was Unleash BTS. So we had Unleash the Future was kind of our thing. So when I moved to Columbus, it was Unleash Columbus, Unleash C-Bus. And the whole idea was like, let's take off the fetters that bind us. And the fetters that bind us are mostly psychological. Like, can we do this? Yes, absolutely. Like, why couldn't we? But yeah, so we had one specific investor that we got. So how it works is you pitch the partners and they invite you back. If they invite you back on a Monday, it's a really good sign. So if you get invited back for a Monday partner meeting, probably an 80% chance you're going to get a term sheet. So went to the Monday meeting. It was a great meeting, very interesting. A lot of heavy hitters, very well known firm that everybody probably knows here. And as I was walking out, they were like, "Hey, when are you moving to San Francisco?" And I was like, "Whoa." I didn't say I was going to move to San Francisco. I said, maybe we can hire some people from San Francisco, and that kind of
root for the 49ers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll wear whatever hat I need to wear, but And luckily, right after that, I was rushing out of that meeting to go to the partner meeting with Khosla, who we ended up going with for Series B, and there was no stipulation to San Francisco from them. In fact, Vinod Khosla, who's their kind of founder, named after Khosla, Khosla Ventures, went to Carnegie Mellon, so he has this affinity for this region. So he was like, sure, Columbus, I'm okay with that. So that kind of made me feel good, and was like, okay. So they checked the box for me. So not pushing us to go into San Francisco, having a lot of guts, big fund, and very keen insight. And that's kind of what we were looking for.
Your wife was from Pittsburgh, as I recall, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So does she want to ultimately stay in the Midwest too? Was that part of it, or ultimately, if you had gone back to her and said, "Look, to make this happen, I really got to move the company to San Francisco," would she have been okay with it, or would that have been a significant problem for you?
Yeah, she would not have been okay with that. And it's less about leaving here and going to California. It's more about moving again. So you got to when I started my first company in 2007, it was crazy, and we got married in 2007. So she's only known that lifestyle, and built that company, sold it in 2011. After selling it, we're like, oh, we're good. We can invest in companies. We're going to hang out in Baltimore. We started more companies and started nonprofits.
Crab cakes all the time.
Yeah, it was great. She was loving it. She loved Baltimore. We had a good gig. It was lived on the water. Everything was nice. It was.
And then you ruined it.
And I went to ruin it. And I was like, "What do you think about Ohio?" She was like, "Are you kidding me?" She was not super pumped about it. But at the end of the day, she is the only reason that I'm able to do this because of her support. It is amazing. From day one, 2007, when I started my first company, she has been right there on the front lines with me, starting these companies, and it's pretty incredible that she's able to tolerate it because it's a lot of work. It's insanity. Even picking up and moving the family. We had at one point during our move, we had 5 houses because we were in between different houses, moving from one house in Baltimore to a new house in Baltimore to one place in Columbus to a new place in Columbus. Then we had a condo in Columbus, and it was nuts, and all of our stuff spread out everywhere. It was pretty insane.
Sounds like
she doesn't want to move to San Francisco.
Sounds like it's probably a good time to own a corrugated box company.
Yeah, it definitely was then, or a moving company for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where 2 Men in a Truck got its start.
Has anything surprised you through the raise process? Anything that any of the VC firms said or asked you for, or anything that they sort of were weird about? That's an interesting anecdote.
No, I would say go back to that geography thing. It really I'd heard about it. I had heard about that there's some kind of idea that in the Midwest you can't do this, but to see it firsthand and to see it at the level I did see it, to experience it, and people truly they believe that you can't build a massive multi-billion-dollar company in the Midwest. And it surprised me. It surprised me that it was that. It was I don't want to use the word insular, but insular.
So here we are now. You've got the money. Now you're scaling. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about the people side of it, and culture. Scaling kind of is being acutely aware of execution, right? So what are you guys now using the money for? And as you think about scaling, what are you paying attention to?
Sure. So I would say when we started the company, we were very tech heavy, and we were building the platform, the product itself. So we were very technology heavy. This was 2013 time frame. So we had a lot of engineers in the bigger mix. In 2014, we went distribution heavy, which is sales and business development. Hired a lot of sales and business development. In 2015, we're starting to hire more engineers again, kind of going back to creating a new platform. It's essentially an app marketplace, which we can go into if you like. But so I'd say that we're kind of doubling down on the hiring of engineers, surging on engineering hiring, still scaling up our BD, our business development and sales staff, so that we can basically cover all 48 contiguous states. We're very close to that now. I think we're by the end of the year. So when we raised money in February, March, when I was out there, we were working the deal, if you will. I think we had around 30 employees, and today we're at 100. By the end of the year, we'll be 140-ish by the end of the year, maybe even more. And that means, large sales force, 35% of the staff being engineers. So what we tend to do at CorssChx is we will test a hypothesis, and then we'll take the hypothesis that we tested last time, and we'll invest in it. So we're always doubling down on something that we had previously tested and proven that it works, and testing something new at the same time. So right now we are, testing this, AppStore concept in the marketplace, and we're starting to learn that our hypothesis is proving correct, and now we're doubling down and investing on it. In the early stage, it was this identity management platform that we were creating. We proved that there was a market for it, and we invested in it heavily. So a lot of sales, distribution, getting it out there. So I would say it is a general ramp up of all the staff. It was new office space. With 100 people comes a lot of real estate, and then with 200 people, with 300 people, with 1,000. So there's a lot of investment in stuff.
I was listening to over the weekend a podcast. Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week guy, does a podcast, and he had the guy from the founder and CEO of Evernote on. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the Evernote CEO said that I thought was really interesting that Jeff Bezos had said to him was, essentially, as you're growing the company, every time you grow by 3 times. So essentially, that everything breaks, right? Your processes break, your systems break, the applications that you're running the company on break, right? Because you can, when you're 3 people, you can work in email essentially, right?
Right.
And then you get a little bit of project management when you're 30 people, right? But everything breaks essentially at those marks. Yeah. Has that been your experience so far? Or have you gotten in front of it enough to prevent those breakages?
Well, I can tell you, when we started the company, we adopted this rule of 1s and 3s that we call it. So there's, things change at every 1 and 3. So 1 employee, 3 employees, 10 employees, 30 employees, 100 employees, 300 employees, 1,000 employees. 1 customer, 3 customers, 10 customers, 30 customers, 100 customers. So the rules of 1s and 3s. So I think if you understand that it's going to change, it doesn't have to break. I mean, there's different ways to define break. Break could be just you have to change everything that you do.
Right.
But no, I would say we've anticipated that. There hasn't been any breaks that have slowed down execution. So we've anticipated all of the changes that we knew were coming with the different levels and scales. So I don't think that's not been something that's really slowed us down at all. And then in that, as you're doing this and as you're scaling, it's important to, we were talking about it today, is building machines, right? So what you'll start with is like hacking something, and you do it like a one-off manual process to prove that it can be done. You'll send people somewhere, you'll get them to sell something, you'll have your engineers build something that we know will fall apart in a week, but you do stuff that doesn't scale. I'm sure you've heard that before. You do something that doesn't scale initially and you prove it. Once you've proven it, then you build a machine that can just crank it out. And then you prove something else, you build another machine. And the cool thing is, like, when you get to the point where you build machines that build machines, and then it becomes incredibly growth intensive. So we actually, there's a product that we are coming out with, which I think will be the first time we have a machine that builds a machine.
I feel like we've now entered into the Terminator.
Yes, we are now in the Matrix. So let me explain that some more, if you don't mind.
Yes,
so let me go on. So let me talk about.
Does anybody else know what the hell he's talking about?
CrossChecker's better. So here's what I'm getting at. So if you think about CrossChx, think about it in 3 layers, right? Layer 1 is our distribution layer. So the way we think about the world is we think 2 fundamental things that maybe people don't agree with, but we believe it to be true. Number 1 is that healthcare does not yet have the internet. That's our number 1 hypothesis that some people don't agree with, but we absolutely believe it. Number 2 is that the key for healthcare and being successful is distribution. So getting out there to as many places as possible, to as many providers as possible, very, very quickly. So our first layer of distribution is we built an identity management system and we gave it away for free. In 1 year, we were able to go live in 100 hospitals. We are in over 140 hospitals, or around 140 hospitals today, completely live with our system. We have over 20 million identities in our system.
So what does identity management mean?
So identity management is like when you walk into a hospital to make sure that they have the right person, right? Is it who you say it is, right? So we use biometrics to help with that. But essentially what we're doing is pulling in patient data, and we're doing identity resolution and entity resolution right off the bat. So we're creating a unique ID and attaching it to a patient, and that unique ID is global. So no matter what hospital you go to, in our entire network, you are known by one unique ID. That is the internet. That's the IP addresses, the global IP addresses for the internet of healthcare. That allows all of the data that you've ever had in your entire lifetime to come to one single point. That's the one thing that's been lacking across the board in healthcare. Right now there's silos of data, it's fractured, you have different identities in different places. There is no internet, there's a bunch of intranets. So to create the internet, we need to create the IP addresses. The IP addresses are the people and their unique IDs. So that's the identity management. We create these unique IDs for every single person. And then once we have that layer, we can do tons of stuff with it. So we have deployed this layer. We have created unique IDs for over 22 million patients. We have done this at super fast speeds. And now we're whenever we give them this free identity management system, we're also giving them an app marketplace, like an app store. So what happens is these hospitals, these health systems have an app store. And in that app store is one app, identity management, and a couple more apps that we give them for free. But now we have access to their data. We're VPN'd into their data center. We're a trusted partner with them. They know that we're good at security. They know we're good at intelligence. They know that we're good at analytics. And we come in and we put app after app after app in our app store, and they purchase those apps for download and usage.
Do banner ads work into this at some point?
No, not at all. No ads. No ads unless there's an app that does ads. So the machine that builds machines. So we wanted to get these applications out there, right? So we built this machine, this app store. We call it Quad. And that gets these apps out to the hospitals. Well, the App Store has an API and an SDK. And for those developers in the room who understand that, it allows other developers to use a simple data model to build an application and put their application in front of all 140 hospitals we have on day one, so they can download. So now somebody in their basement can build a healthcare app without ever seeing any PHI or HIPAA data. That healthcare app can now be distributed out to hundreds of hospitals instantly that they can download for use. So that's the machine that builds machines. So that's the app store that allows app developers to build apps. So we're building a machine that builds other machines. Does that make sense?
Yep, I think I'm with you.
Now, are we in the fourth dimension?
Yeah, yes. My head's gonna explode. So whatever dimension that is. So it sounds like almost. And I sort of hate comparisons, but I'm going to do one.
That's right.
To see if I can, maybe connect the dots a little bit. So it sounds like
What is one like?
It sounds like a little bit of a Salesforce play, right? Putting a platform out there, right? Mm-hmm. That essentially, CRM is,
right.
kind of whatever, right?
Sure.
But Salesforce, their real play ultimately became this cloud platform that other people now build products on top of, to get access to the CRM data that companies have on Salesforce.
Right. So the developer tools and the platform nature of Salesforce is very similar to what we're building in healthcare. So the idea is that it's similar to Salesforce. So they have this ability now for people to develop applications that are going in front of enterprises very, very quickly because they own the enterprise, they own the distribution in the enterprise. So we're doing a very similar thing with healthcare. We're saying you don't have to be a massive healthcare company that builds a piece of software that then spends millions of dollars with sales pushing down the doors in hospitals that take forever. We're saying that you can build an application on our data model and we'll put it out for you, and they can just download it. So it's very, very similar from that perspective.
Okay, so I got that one right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, good.
85%.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, 85%.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah. What's your monetization model then? So are you charging, if you're mostly free to the hospitals and the healthcare providers, are you then charging people to develop on the platform ultimately?
No, we charge for the apps. So we charge for our apps, and the app developers will charge for their apps, and we will take a share of what those developers build, in exchange for the distribution.
Subscription-based model?
More than likely in most cases. I mean, there are different models for different applications, but that'll be the majority of it, subscription. So, $1,000, $10,000 a month, whatever it is.
How are you acquiring customers right now? So you've had sales, and BD for a while, right? Do you feel like you have a pretty good end-to-end business development engine?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, our sales engine, it's pretty incredible because we go straight for the jugular and we do cold calling. Like, we cold call the front desk of the hospital. That's how we get our sales. So we'll cold call the front desk of the hospital. We'll get into the person we need, CIO or the patient access manager or the director of revenue or revenue cycle management, wherever we need to be. We'll call into that point. We'll explain to them what we're doing. We'll convince them to take a meeting. We'll go give them the meeting, and then we'll do a launch very, very quickly after that. When we first started this, they said the sales cycle for healthcare is super long. And I was like, oh, that's nice. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to do that differently. So we said in our first year, we had one customer, and we said, we're going to get 100 customers in 1 year. And people said that couldn't be done in healthcare. But we just, juggernauted it, right? People make hundreds of phone calls a day. We have a bell, like a ship's bell, and every time they get a meeting, they ring it. So if you're in our office, you'll hear the bell ringing, like constantly, people clapping. It's just a very aggressive brute force model. So I like to say that, because we don't have any precision surgical weapon systems yet. So we don't have the GPS guided bombs. What we have right now is kind of bayonets fixed, right? So we are bayonets fixed right now, and that's okay. That's how we were going to do it until we develop these more surgical or precision tools, and it's working and it's effective. Yeah, there's some who's in sales that's here. So there you go. So we're obviously not making any sales right now, but it's only good on the West Coast. Wait, is our West Coast guy still in the office? All right, good.
Only East Coasters can. Okay, see, that's a very mindful team, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's rewind back a little bit. How'd you come up with the idea?
So remember, we just sold, a company, and we were just we were investing in companies. We had started a services company, started an incubator, started a nonprofit. Things like that, just what people do when they sell companies.
I can speak from personal experience too. Don't start a services company.
That's true.
It's a brutal way to make a living.
It's a grind.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So So in the military or in the intelligence community, which is where I came from, we worked a lot with biometrics. So biometrics was nothing new to me, and I was used to fingerprints, facial photos, iris scans, voice biometrics, whatever. So the idea started when I was working in this intelligence program. We were using biometrics in Afghanistan, and I thought, it'd be interesting if this could be used to pull up a patient. Because I know it works very quickly, and we built the system, so we know how to do it. And then really, so I was in Baltimore, and I was sitting there okay, I want to start a company or something. And if I could pick one person I want to start a company with, who would it be? And I thought back to a guy I went to undergrad with, Brad Masco, who's back there somewhere. There he is. And it said I would want him to build a company with me. So I found him on LinkedIn and Facebook and harassed him for a month. Finally, he answered me, and I was like, "Hey, I'm building this. I've got this little mini empire. Come join it." And he thought I was crazy at first, but eventually he quit his job, moved to Baltimore, and we just sat. And he was running the kind of portfolio companies in our little venture thing. And I told him this. I was like, "What do you think about this idea of biometrics in healthcare?" And we started talking about it more and more and more. And finally, I think we were sitting in my basement And we just started really getting into it and thought, like, this could actually be something. And the thing that tipped the scale was that at the same time, I had been traveling back and forth to my hometown, which is Gallipolis, Ohio. So it's a really small town in southeastern Ohio. And that's right, some Gallipolis love in the room.
If you're from Gallipolis, are you a Gallipoliser?
So, well, I think Gallipolitan, I don't know. Gallipolitan, I don't know. I don't know, Gallia-County, let's just put it that way, let's do that, it's easier. So I was traveling back and forth, was doing some like economic development, and starting like businesses and things like that. And one of the biggest problems that affects pretty much everyone and everybody has a family member that's affected by prescription drug abuse in my hometown. And it was an issue where I was like, there's got to be a way to fix this. And then all of a sudden, like the light bulb went off, and it was like, hey, wait a second. If we can use biometrics to identify patients, we can know if they're doctor shopping, right? And that's kind of how it all came together. We said, wait a second, this could be used to find people who are doctor shopping, and we could actually help, cut down on the prescription drug abuse problem in my hometown. So literally, we partnered with the local health system in Gallipolis, Holzer Health System, and said, can we take a look at your data? And started, kind of peeked behind the curtain in the data, and I was like, whoa. I was like, healthcare has a huge identity problem. Like, people have multiple records and duplicate records and different socials and different systems, and they're transposed and names are messed up. And that's not because Holzer is bad at it, that's because that is endemic across all of healthcare. And so I thought there's a real opportunity here, and this reminds me a lot of what we did in the intelligence community, because at NSA, we had a lot of people, right, in the database, and bad guy people. And we had to
Not you, Jeremy, don't worry.
Just bad guy people. So, but we had to know when that bad guy person was the same as another bad guy person that maybe CIA or FBI or DIA or NGA or you name it, whatever three-letter agency had. So, and then bringing that data together was really what allowed us to see a more comprehensive picture. But entity resolution, identity resolution was critical to that. So the same thing exists in healthcare, right? So you ended up looking into the system, seeing silos, seeing no information sharing, seeing no identity resolution, and realizing this is exactly the problem the intelligence community had, and we kind of know how to fix it, right? So we saw it as a big opportunity. Brad and I then started to talk to more people and getting more interest, and people started using the system that we had built at Holzer. And it was about that time we met Mark Kwame and said, hey, he's like, what are you guys working on? I'm like, well, we got all this stuff in Baltimore, and we got this augmented reality company, and we're doing this services company, and we're doing this defense company, and we're doing this parking company, and we're doing this. And it's like, and we have this idea for healthcare where we think we could own identity. He said, whoa. I was like, stop.
Let's talk about
reality. Well, that was another company, but no, he said, he's like, this identity thing could be huge if you own identity for healthcare. He said, move to Columbus, we're going to build a multi-billion-dollar company. And we're like, well, never done that before. So it sounds interesting.
Would you, if Brad had continued to turn down your advances, would you have moved forward?
It's hard to say. There's this butterfly effect, right? Like, would it have happened had Brad not quit his job and moved? Probably not. Only because I think there's a lot of things that occurred, a lot of catalysts that made it actually happen. I had a stack of index cards with lots of little ideas on it, right? But it was the recognition that that idea was actually really, really special that made it stand out and make it executable. And I don't know that I would have realized in that stack of index cards that this idea was actually that special. But it was that coupled with the personal experience of hometown problem with prescription drug abuse that just that made it feel like, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing right now.
Do you have any routines? How do you sort of approach day-to-day life and leading the company day-to-day?
So I have routines. Let me think for a second. I have routines that change probably every few months. So I don't know if you want to call those routines, but I have cycles that I go through. My current routine is 7:45 breakfast. A few days of the week I have that with a key leader in the company. After that, it's creation of to-do list. And I kind of split my to-do list in third. So it's third of it is people who have tasked me. So if I got anybody sent me an email, then that's a task. If I got a question mark at the end of a sentence, that's a task. That's why I don't like question marks. That's another story. So second, third is things I need to be inventing. So we have this core value of CrossChx is invent something daily. So I like to invent something every day. And it could be something like a process. It could be a new idea for an application. It could be a feature. It could be changing a letter in a thing. But some kind of invention. So I want to spend a third of my time inventing. And then third of the time is kind of like management by walking around. So I like to go stare over the shoulder of Frank, my director of engineering, who was here at one point, probably now fixing bugs. But yeah, so that's kind of, so do that, and then
He's tired of you looking over his shoulders and want you picking on him at the meeting too.
Hey, what's up? Yeah. So to-do list, knock that out, and then so for the summer I've been deployed to my office. So it's kind of weird, but so I used to deploy when I was in the intelligence, I was in the military and go to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm used to this deployment world. So I've like deployed to my office. So I sleep there and shower there and live there basically every day. And then on the weekends I go to my lake house, which is where my wife and kids are. So now my 5-year-old starting kindergarten in a week, so my deployment will be over in 1 week. But so my routine today is different than what my routine will be next week. Next week it'll be cooking dinner and talking about kindergarten. But now my evening is completely dedicated to CrossChx.
So we could find out by asking some people. So, but I'll ask you first. What would your team say about you as a leader and an executive of the company?
I don't know. I would imagine. Yeah, I'm not sure what they would say. Here, let me answer this question.
Okay.
Instead. Okay. Here's what I want to be as a leader. So I think like what I strive for is, I want to be thoughtful, which is just, as I've been thinking this for a long time, is I want to be thoughtful. So I want people to know that I have thought about stuff. So if I tell them to do something, I want them to know, like, he's probably thought about it, right? He's probably been very thoughtful in why he's making this decision, particularly. Considerate in the way of, like, considering other people's opinions. I think that's super important. So, like, considering how it's going to affect other departments and other divisions and other people in the company, and then understanding, like, people's input and kind of bringing that into the whole process. And then relentless is kind of those are the 3 words I think of often. So relentless is just like, I want everyone to think I'm not going to give up, because if they think that, then it makes them feel like, okay, well, this is going to work because, Sean's not going to give up regardless of anything that happens.
Yeah, nobody can just wait you out, right?
That's right. Yeah, I dare them. No. If we're going to get this done, and we take a relentless approach to it, and I hope that people see that. So there's a lot of them here today, so you can probably call BS and all that if you want, but
yeah, we're gonna have to turn on a third mic and do a walk around. When and how did you and Brad sort of divide duties, and has that evolved over time?
Yeah, it has. It changes, and it will change. It will continue to change, and I think, especially as we grow and we continue to take over the world of healthcare, my role will change, and our company will grow. We'll have more senior leaders in the company that have bigger responsibilities, so it'll be more of a management of those senior leaders. So yeah, of course it will evolve. Right now we divide it up where I cover down on engineering and product and business development. He covers down on marketing, and he covers down on finance and human resources and operations and kind of all those pieces, what we call resources, which is all the internal ops. So that's how we're dividing it today, but I expect that that'll evolve over time. But it's worked out great so far. I can actually take a vacation. I can go to or unplug and not have to worry about the company not running.
Yep,
pretty cool.
Cool. Over there, you had a question earlier. Do you remember what it was? Oh, cool. Okay. Other questions for Sean? Sure.
First, I want to say I appreciate you mentioning kind of fighting the drug battle with people with prescription. I work from Zanesville, so we understand it's a small town and everything, and my brother dealt with this, so that's cool. Unleash Columbus, I think, is great. You should push that even more because it fires me up. But as far as the term sheet, with someone with an idea, it's just an idea, and there's way more power in his investment dollars, as far as what he's going to take from you.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys were obviously past that when you went and raised $15 million. It's proven it's working. But when you got the term sheet, can you describe, the next, I don't know, hours or days? Did you just go to Brad, or did you go to some advisors to seek counsel on, the terms?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question was like, what do we do after we got the term sheet? Like, what was next? So once you get a term sheet, and you'll hopefully get a couple or a few, it depends on what round you're into. It all depends. It really depends on what you're building, right? So like if you're in Columbus, Ohio, and you're trying to build a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch, then the reality is there's probably not that many people who can advise you on that term sheet. That's the reality. There may be a few that have actually done it. And I only take advice from people who have been in the battle, who have led the battle, or what I call our exemplaries, people who actually are an example of something, right? So anyway, I would only take advice from, so it'd be me, Brad, and then our board member. And that's basically the only people who take advice on that term sheet. So that's the way I do it. It's pretty simple though. Like the question is really, you kind of know going into it how much the company you're going to give up. So when you ask for, we're raising $15 million and we want to give up X percent of the company, everybody sort of knows what the valuation is going to end up being. And the terms that are other than the valuation are generally pretty standard. There's tweaks on preferences and different types of covenants, but generally they're pretty standard, so you can get through those pretty quickly. And those aren't if you have the investor you want, valuation you want, with even the valuation, the most important thing is, do you have enough money to execute your next phase? Do you have the investor you want? All that other stuff will figure itself out, like the terms and all that stuff. That's what I think. Or actually, Brad figures it out, but somebody figures that out.
Somebody has to do the real work. Right?
Yeah. We don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we're taking an unfavorable term sheet, but these people, the venture capitalists at that level, don't mess around with bad terms because they will very quickly become, non-founder friendly if they do. So generally, you're going to get pretty good terms in those cases. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
So how long is the $15 million going to last?
Well, what time is it? It's TBD. I can tell you that we're not building a small company. We have 100 employees now. That's a lot of money that goes out the door. We just now started kicking on any sort of thought of revenue, just to throw that out there. So we're burning lots of money. We are spending it on building a great, massive company. We're going to end up raising more money. That's just the reality of it. To do something like we want to do, that's what happens. Not sure exactly when that's going to be, but stay tuned.
Other questions for Sean?
What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear. My biggest fear is having to take a military physical fitness test. My second biggest fear in CrossCheck. It's true. Brad and I were talking about this today. I was like, what my biggest fear is? Taking an Army physical fitness test right now. So anyway, true. So, but in CrossCheck, I think the biggest fear is am I doing enough? Right? Am I doing everything I could possibly be doing? And you always question that as a founder, as a senior leader, as an employee. I think it's always am I doing the things I need to be doing? Because there's no manual for it. The reality is this is less than 1% of companies ever do this, right? Really ever do this. So there's not a good manual. There's not a good book to go read necessarily that tells you exactly what to do. There's things that give you platitudes and ideas and theories and concepts that you can kind of cobble together. But when I'm sitting there at 9 o'clock at night and I'm what should I be doing right now? My biggest fear is not doing what I need to be doing. Does that make sense?
That is the position that someone like you has to live in, right? Which is this kind of constant state of paranoia, right? and that's, sort of evaluation all the time. Am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decisions, etc.? How do you deal with that, even in your own head, emotionally, and to not have it become a negative overpowerment?
So so it's tough. I mean, obviously, but I will say, so one thing I discovered, and my wife and I talk about this a lot, is like happiness is like bullshit. It's actually a giant conspiracy. So I'm serious. They're like, oh, I want to be happy. Like, no, happiness sucks.
I came into this thinking I was happy, so now I'm curious to see if I'm really unhappy.
You don't want happiness. What you want is joy. What you want is to look at something and take joy in what you're doing, and it's going to be hard. Like the things that you truly take joy in, it's going to be hard and it's going to be miserable. But that's why it's so good. You know what I mean? But happiness is like crap. That's like giving up. Like, oh, I just want to be happy. Like, okay, fine, go be happy somewhere else. Like, we're going to do something amazing, and we're going to take joy in that. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be miserable, but we're going to get through it together because, like one of the things story I tell is like on the Syrian border with a company of Marines, and everything sucked, and like the food sucked, and getting shot at, and it was the best culture ever. Because everybody was there to do a specific mission. We took joy and pride in what we were doing. We weren't happy, but you knew the people to your left and the people to your right had your back, and the fact that they didn't, you would probably die. So like it was very important that existed. So that's what we strive for. It's not happiness. So yeah, it's tough. Mentally, it's difficult. It creates negativity. But if you think about the joy of accomplishing what you want to accomplish, building something massive, changing the industry forever. Like it'll never ever be the same after we're done with it, ever. Like that gives you joy, and that's more important than happiness. So that's my happiness is a conspiracy. Just get that bumper sticker.
Retweet. Other questions? Yes.
Before you started your first company, what was your skill set? What was your background? And how has that evolved? What skill sets that you didn't possess and now you have? Talk about that, please.
Sure. So I was a political science major. So I basically went through college in order to go to ROTC so I could become an officer in the Air Force, an intelligence officer. All I ever wanted to do growing up was become an intelligence officer. So I didn't really, I didn't get an engineering degree or a business degree or anything that was really applicable to the real world. I ended up getting a political science degree. So when I got out of, the military, left NSA, the only skill I had was what I learned at NSA, and that was, or in the military in general, which was, if you want something done, you have to do it yourself. And you have the ability to do anything. Like, honestly, like, I remember like, in Iraq, and we were getting, like, bombed, like, shelled a lot, right? Like, people were shooting rockets at us. And finally, I was like, man, somebody's got to stop these rockets. And I was like, wait a second, like, I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I remember getting up and like, okay, I need to figure this out. So like, what am I going to do? And I started thinking, and I was like, okay, they're using these 57 millimeter rockets, and they're these Katyusha rockets that are from these Soviet aircraft, and those things probably burn at a certain IR temperature. So if I can have a sensor that can pick up a certain IR temperature, I could cross-cue an aircraft and drop a bomb on the target. Blah 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 blah. So I worked out this way to like go, get the bad guys as soon as they shot the rockets, and it ended up cutting down rocket attacks. So at that point, I was like, wait a second. If anything is going to get done, I just got to do it myself. So when I walked into starting my first company, it was I can fix whatever I want to fix. And then I could Google really well, and I could read Wikipedia very well. So that's how I got my business degree, which really was helpful, and legal degree too, from Wikipedia. So, yeah, so skill sets evolved over time, and you just learn it. You just pick it up. It's on the job. I mean, the experiences you gain in life are the testing of yourself. Like, are you going to actually stand up and try to do something, or are you going to, say, hey, somebody else has got that? If you're the kind of person that says, I'm going to do it, not someone else, then you'll learn all that other stuff. At least that's my opinion.
Couple of more questions for Sean. Yes, sir.
This is coming from two perspectives. One, since you started as an angel investor, and today as a founder. When you were investing in, when you began seeking investment, what level of depth did you go to? Just starting with an idea, or
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I think what I did as an angel investor is not the same as what my investors are doing for me today. It's a totally different world. I was interested in $40-50 million outcomes, right? I was interested in somebody who could grow a business and sell it for tens of millions of dollars. To me, that was a success, right? With the investors I have now, that was a total failure, like dismal, horrible, no way ever failure. I mean, so what I was really concentrating on was building wealthy people that could then invest in other small companies, right? Building this ecosystem of small businesses, right? So what I looked at was like the founders, are they good enough? Could they take it to the $20 million business? Are they going to get revenue very quickly to prove something out so that I can flip it over to, sell it, so we can sell the company, get an acquisition? Those are the kinds of things I looked for. And those are probably the things that angels in that world look at when they're trying to decide what they invest in, right? But then there are the VCs like the ones that we're talking to today that aren't at all interested in any of that. They want to look at, can this be a $1 billion company? And do these people have the right thing, what it takes to get there? And like, there's so many times in CrossChx where I wanted to go get revenue, and I was like, oh, we're gonna make all this revenue, and you got these people want to give us money, and they're like, no, turn it down. No money yet. I'm like, oh man, like that's what I know to do. Like, I only know how to bootstrap a company. Like, I didn't know how to run a venture-backed company, but we drank the Kool-Aid after some time. I was like, okay, I get it. It's about nodes on the network. It's about growth. It's about scale. So I'll say that as an angel investor, if you're building, or as a founder, if you're building a company that's going to be like a $50 million outcome, then understand your revenue model, understand your business model, be able to articulate that, have some proven traction to get there. If you're building a $1 billion possibility company or a venture-backed, huge scale, massive company, then figure out how you're going to fundamentally change the world in some way. Put a team together that can do it, and believe something that no one else believes. And that's and fundamentally figure out how you're going to do it, right? But not necessarily focus on like, do I have the profit margins to kind of get there? So does that make sense? Like, there's two different things to think about.
Oh yeah, and just to build on that, to go to like the next level, where did you come up with, like, what level did you go into actually developing the product for CrossChx?
So when did we start developing the product? Yeah, I mean, we started developing the product like right away. We had some money, and then we had some early small investors, and we had some money to call it $1 million, right, to just try out stuff. So that was helpful. But let's say you're starting from scratch. Like my first company, I had no money at all. In fact, I was like, my wife and I got married. We had less than $1,000 in the bank. I started the company. It was like really not a good situation. But when I got my first purchase order, we didn't build anything. My first company, we ended up building stuff. But initially, I drew down put some stuff on PowerPoint. I was like, hey, we can do this. And the government was like, okay. And when I got the first check, I think my first purchase order was like $86,000, right? And I was like, oh my God.
Score.
Now let's go build this thing. So we built it, and then we sold more, and we built more. It was, we ended up doing close to $60 million in revenue. But it was started with just an idea. We got the money. We kind of step by step bootstrap. So again, it depends what kind of company you're building and what stage you are, and stuff like that.
Other questions, Melissa?
How do you talk about, you're still out there, you're probably going to have to get some more money, but you talk about your people, and the word is sacrifice. So how do you
Right.
think about helping them share in the success, but then know you're going to have to go out and ask somebody for even more money? How do you structure that?
Everybody that came to Startup Grind gets like 0.5%. or something.
Well,
surprise!
No, I think it's an important question. So, I mean, the great thing about having a company like ours and having investors in our company is that we have the opportunity. Like, if I was just if I did this myself and it was like my 100% owned company, I may want to retain 100% of a $10 million outcome, right? But this isn't going to be a $10 million outcome. Like, the idea is that it's a much, much bigger outcome sometime down the road, potentially even going public. And the idea is that everyone at the ground level has an opportunity to share in that. I personally want, let me go back up a second. So when I was like 27, my goal was like, oh, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. That was like my goal, right? I was like, oh. So, but like once you get, once you eclipse those things, you're like, okay, what's the next goal? I want to have $5 million by the time I'm 35. I want to do. You keep adding these $1 million numbers to your goal set, and you realize that's really vapid, right? It's not a very good goal. So soon after that, I made a goal. I want to make 50 people millionaires, right? That was my new goal. And it's really cool. Like having that goal is pretty neat because then you look at the world a little differently. It's like, oh, I'm going to be you a millionaire, and you're going to be a millionaire, and you're going to be a millionaire, and you're going to be a millionaire. And it's really cool to do that.
You left me out.
No, that's all right. Okay. But it's really neat to do. And now at CrossChx, I think we could make 500 people millionaires. I mean, truly, I really think we could. And I mean, look at the first 200 people at Facebook made like $30 million at the minimum. I mean, it's incredible what these companies, when they go, they really go. What they can do is pretty amazing. So, yeah, I mean, I think we have the opportunity to go well beyond making 50 people millionaires. So the sacrifice will be worth it.
Final question. Yeah.
Do you have plans to attack sort of the patient work as well, to give patients empowerment when they walk into another patient?
Absolutely. Yeah, so absolutely. So that's a part of the platform I didn't talk about, but we are currently doing that a little bit with a basically a kiosk. It's an iPad on a stand called Q. So basically a patient can walk in, you can swipe your driver's license, all your data kind of pulls up immediately. You add your insurance card information and other data to it. And that profile runs with you no matter where you go. So no more filling out the clipboards and doing the insurance card again and all that stuff. But that's just the beginning. So we're putting out a mobile app, right, that we call Quo. You notice the theme here. So Quo on the mobile app, it's actually for patients, right? So you can download Quo. You can pick which hospital you want to go to based on wait times. We derive the wait times because we have the data. You can go to the hospital. You can check in. They get all your information, insurance information, all that updated. You can pay for your visit. You get all your medical records. All that data is still on the Quo platform. So yes, we are building that. And the neat thing about that too is eventually you'll have a CrossChx login, kind of like a Facebook Connect login, where app developers could build a really cool healthcare analytics app for the patient. You log in with your CrossChx account, and all your healthcare data goes into that new app, right? So right now, somebody builds a healthcare app. It kind of sucks because you can't put all your, electronic health record data and your history of medical data in there. But if you could just log in with your CrossChx account, all your data zaps into that app, then we're going to have a whole new industry of people making these really amazing applications we haven't thought of yet, right? That utilize our platform. So, I mean, we hope to create an industry of people making apps for people, for patients, using our platform. We hope that create an industry of developers building applications for hospitals using our platform and completely kind of upend the current system. Does that answer your question?
Cool. Please help me in thanking Chelsea for coming and leading the video. How cool is it that Sean and Brad and the team at CrossChx are building a really big successful company in Columbus, and when they could have been lured away, didn't and said they're going to do it here. I mean, it matters. It matters beyond just the dollars. It matters that that they said we're going to do it in Columbus with talented people in Columbus. So help me thank Sean for coming and talking to us.